Hi, I'm Carolyn Paine, and I am here with Illeana Douglas. You know her as an actress in so many incredible films. Just really a prolific film career. TV, I have to say, Seinfeld, one of my favorites. The Orange Lady, right? Garrett Girl.
Yes.
Yes. And she is also a filmmaker, producer, and author, and we will get to that. And you are a Connecticut resident.
Yes.
Yes. So, first off, let's talk about how did you get started in acting?
Uh, it sounds like it's made up, but I was living in rural Connecticut. I first got the job as a hostess at a dinner theater, which unfortunately was run by gangsters, so it only lasted like 6 weeks. And so there was like my time in the theater, and then luck would have it that I believe it or not, I did see in the newspaper this little advertisement for a youth theater at the Hartford Stage Company. There was only one problem. You had to be a Hartford resident and you had to be an at-risk teen, meaning like you lived in the not so good area in
So
Hartford.
your first acting assignment was posing as that? Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
I found someone who lived in a really bad neighborhood in Hartford. I faked my address and I got an audition for luckily there was no internet then, so I guess we couldn't check up. But anyway, I got myself into this group which was called the Hartford Stage Company Youth Theater. It was run by an incredible man who's now deceased, Clay Stevenson. Sadly died of AIDS in the 80s, but he had an incredible influence on me. And it really changed my life in the sense that it we got paid. We did all aspects of theater. We did small parts, we did big parts, and we I did this for 3 years, and it really set up for me, again, just the kind of stability of the theater, meeting people that we all sort of shared the same dream, and then also realizing how hard it was gonna be because they were really tough on us. But after 3 years in the program and what was amazing was, again, like, the ability for us as teenagers, as a 16-year-old, to be getting wages was really incredible. So right from the stage company, I went straight to New York to, go to acting school, and
Yeah.
the rest is
The
history.
rest is history. So let's talk a little bit about that history. I'm gonna ask you, what is your favorite film role? What is or, something that really stands out?
I mean, probably the film Grace of My Heart because, it was a collaboration with the director, Allison Anders, who has remained a really good friend of mine. It was another opportunity of somebody I was doing a lot of independent films, and I was up at Sundance, and I saw her film Gas Food Lodging, and I really just reached out to her and said, I which can sometimes work, just to say, I love your films. I would love to work with you in any capacity. And so we met. And then after we met, we tried to come up with a project and ultimately it was Grace of My Heart. But it was really, it was just an incredible collaboration. It was about music. It was about the Brill building. It was about a woman, finding her voice. So there was a lot of parallels of Allison's life and my life. And
Oh, it's like much more personal.
yes, now I will say that on the same day that our movie was greenlit, Kevin Smith would his movie was greenlit was like about a couple in a mall, and he got $10 million, and we got $5 million to do a musical. So uh,
Yeah.
that was kind of hard, but
The important thing is it got greenlit.
it got greenlit, and we were jumping up and down until we found out that Kevin Smith got $10 million to shoot in one location, but again, going back to the Hartford Stage Company and that, as I said, it really set me up for life that, like, okay, we gotta get together, we gotta do this thing quickly and all hands on deck, and I in a sense, I really appreciate that. I mean, I love doing independent films because of that.
I think that that's kind of the cool thing with theater and film is like even at the highest level, there's this sense of camaraderie and this sense of hustle that
Yeah, sometimes when you don't have any money, it obviously forces you to be creative, but it also forces you, like when you're doing a big budget movie, everybody is in their own trailer. And when something is low budget, you're kind of all together. You're shifting from one
yeah.
room to another. And so in a sense you have more collaboration because everybody's hanging out and listening to music and
It's a different bonding
exactly.
experience. It's like getting to be at summer camp.
Very much so. Which again was like my experience at the stage company.
Yeah.
I was sharing music and songs and things like that.
So, through all of your, career and acting, you now have become an author and have written a couple books, including a memoir and then a book about film in Connecticut.
Mhm.
And that's that book is really fascinating. So talk a little bit about that book.
Well, the Connecticut in the Movies book I wrote because having grown up here, I was always fascinated by, when you see a movie about Connecticut, as many of you know, it's usually you see a couple and they're driving to Connecticut. You go, oh, something really horrible is about to happen to them now.
As well.
And yet Connecticut has such a history going back to the silent era. They were making movies here in the silent era, and then I wanted to talk about the identity of Connecticut, of that because Connecticut never really grabbed onto its own identity in films. So many different filmmakers have used Connecticut for like a horror movie or a Hallmark movie, and, it's been all sorts of different things, so I wanted to do what I call a road trip through the state and talk about the films through the state and talk about how our identity has changed through from the '30s, the '40s, the '50s, the '60s, and so it's 100 films. Again, everybody is really surprised that aside from Mystic Pizza, that there's been about 300 movies that have either been set in Connecticut or place, Connecticut as a location.
Well, something that I found that you and I have in common is we are fans of classic film.
Yes.
And so many classic films take place here in Connecticut.
Mhm.
I am not a Connecticut native. I grew up in Boston. So my idea of Connecticut was really shaped as a young child from watching things like Bringing Up Baby,
Yeah.
Christmas in Connecticut, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, where you're looking at this Connecticut ideal. And I think that's something that your book really does well is look at, for example, in Bringing Up Baby, like the idea of coming to Connecticut the second that Katharine Hepburn is, and this is like madcap quest to pursue Cary Grant, she gets him in a car and drives him to Connecticut to get him to out of the city to get his attention.
Well, yeah, that's one of the themes in movies when before it turned to the Stepford Wives and horror movies, Connecticut usually represented somebody getting out of New York City and kind of, finding their authentic self, finding the girl of their dreams, in Connecticut, and that's what so much of Bring Up Baby is about. And but yet, in all of those films, Bring Up Baby, Christmas in Connecticut, and Mr. Blandings, they all have organic Connecticut origins. In Bring Up Baby, it's the Peabody Museum is and the Cary Grant character, it sounds hard to believe, is actually based on a real paleontologist who was at the Peabody Museum.
At Yale, I did
Yeah.
not know that until
I know. So those and Mr. Blandings is based on a real author who worked for Time Magazine in the '40s and built a house here. And so it's for people that especially want to make movies, what is great about the book is that it creates a blueprint of the state so that you can say to people, listen, we're a lot more than, Greenwich or Darien. It gives you this whole vast sort of landscape of all the different genres, classes, etcetera, that are here in Connecticut.
yeah, it's very fascinating, and you have them here today. I suggest buying this book, and it's a beautiful book too. It's like a great coffee table book.
Yes. And
So, yeah, it's really wonderful, and it's it would be such a fun journey to watch all these films and just like make that your whole. You did a podcast before. Has there been a podcast made with somebody watching all these films with this book and going through it?
No, not yet. I would love for somebody to do
I mean,
it.
I think I just found my new life journey here.
There's even what there's a chapter on called Creepy Connecticut where it's got like some of the crimes and a couple unsolved murders. You could
Yeah,
that would be a good
yeah,
podcast.
true crime podcast. Yeah, we were nailing it here today. I don't have a new plan going forward, but so in writing this book and being a Connecticut resident, and really just coming from such a background in film, and what makes Connecticut film so important to you? Why be here today and be speaking to Connecticut as being this new like Hollywood East push for that? What do you think makes it special here?
Well, the whole again, I write about this so much in the book that there have been really incredible Connecticut stories. To give you an example, Thurgood Marshall, who was the first Black Supreme Court justice, well, he got his start on this really big case here in Connecticut. And the filmmakers really wanted to make the movie here, but they couldn't get the proper tax credit. And so they had to shoot the whole movie in Buffalo. It's an incredible story. The film is called Marshall. I write about it extensively, but it's kind of sad that because it was shot in Buffalo, they had to use a lot of interiors. It doesn't quite have that Connecticut feel. Um, However, it is an authentically Connecticut story, so I suggest everybody, kind of check it out. But that is like the downside of that's what I was saying before. Because Connecticut does not embrace its own diversity and its own identity, that's why you just keep getting movies like it's gonna be a horror movie or.
Hallmark, Christmas, love story,
Exactly.
sorry that if you were making those or in those. Yeah, they've all done it. It's okay.
And so there's so many, there's so many interesting, which I write about in the book. There's so many interesting people here that you could do films about. There's so many interesting locations. Again, as you drive through the state,
Yeah.
it's not just the picturesque and the revolutionary, but there's also the industrial towns, which really kind of fascinate me. I go into great length talking about the rise and fall of industrial towns like Norwich, Waterbury, New London. And these are towns where if we could get people to make movies there, you go to certain places and they just know how to do it, like Litchfield, Kent, where they've taken their old abandoned factories and turned them into art galleries or studios, etc. And I feel like, those places, that I mentioned are Middletown, Connecticut, another one. They're so ripe
Yeah.
for us to be making movies here and have a real New England because again, it's only growing up here that how really interesting, it is. And I think I really want that was again part of the reason to do the book was so that more people would come here and understand there's so many different aspects to Connecticut to make films here.
Yeah, and I really hope that that does. I hope that there is more films being made here and that you help open people's minds to the possibilities of
Well,
Connecticut.
I wrote about, I end the book with a movie that I actually shot in Guilford, which was called The Green, and coincidentally, it's actually the only film, made in Connecticut that is centers around the green, and the Connecticut greens are so important. But, and it's a story about a gay couple who moved to New York, and he becomes a teacher, and then he's falsely accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a student, and the whole town turns against him. And we shot this whole thing in Guilford, and everybody in Guilford, got involved, and we were shooting in people's houses, and it just was such a wonderful it was the kind of experience I had wanted and hoped because you have that unique Connecticut architecture, you have the old houses, but you also have that what I love is, again, that slightly sort of sinister undertone, you're walking across the green and you feel the sense of history of where you are and both the good things that have happened there and, also we did burn a few witches at the stake here.
Yes, Connecticut is the start of the witch trial.
I know. We don't take enough credit for that.
We don't take credit for the witches are from here.
We we were killing them way before Boston.
Yeah, we started that whole thing. We started that horrible slaughter of women. I don't know why we don't take credit for that war. All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.